welcome. Welcome to the Aga Khan University, the Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilizations. My name is Gianluca Parolini, and I'm the faculty lead on the governance program here at the Institute. Besides its interest in current affairs, the governance program this year is organizing a series of events on language and politics under the theme Translations of Governance and Governance of Translation. So it's my utmost delight that we have the book launch for Nancy, who is also our 2019 research fellow here at the Institute. The book launch, as you all know, is the book is titled The Politics of Palestinian Multilingualism, Speaking for Citizenship, which I never thought about it. I just thought about it now. It connects us in the sense that my first book was on citizenship in the Arab world. So, but of course it's, legal citizenship, and you're looking at different things. I will just make a brief introduction, and then I will leave the floor to Nancy and Deborah. Nancy Hoker, as you probably all know, is the 2019 Research Fellow at the AKU ISMC for the Governance Program. Professor Deborah Cameron is the Rupert Murdoch Professor of Language and Communication in Oxford and Fellow of the Worcester College. She also has a blog, which you can look up as Language, a Feminist Guide. If you look at the past couple of entries of blog posts, you will see that Deborah engages with the politics and political economy of low and lower pitched voices. Now I wish to reassure her that this is not an experiment gone rogue. It's just a lot of erratic weather and the end of term yesterday. So I will just turn the floor now to Nancy and Deborah. I will just pick it up at the end to remind you of the future events of the governance program on language and politics after the summer. So please join me in welcoming Nancy and Deborah.
Thank you very much, Jean-Luc, and thank you everyone who's here. Can you hear me? I can't tell whether this actually works or not. As Jean-Luc said, I am a professor at the University of Oxford, and I met Nancy here when she was a DPhil student and then later a postdoc at Oxford in the faculty that calls itself Oriental Studies. So I've known Nancy for a long time. I knew her while she was writing her doctorate and later while she was writing this book, and that's why I'm in conversation with her tonight. But I must disclaim actual co-authorship. This is her book, not mine, and I'm just going to kind of facilitate some discussion about it. First, just me and her, and then later on, you. So I think a good place to start would be to ask you, Nancy, kind of what led you to write this book. Since I've known you for so long, I know it's quite a big departure from what you worked on for your PhD. So what led you to be interested in the citizenship thing?
Thank you, Debbie. Yes, so previously I did research on Arabic and Hebrew contact and language phenomena associated with contact, and the case studies I researched were migrant workers, Palestinian migrant workers who are employed by Israeli companies. I also looked at refugees in refugee camps in the West Bank, and also political prisoners who've spent time in Israeli prisons. So then while I was doing that research, I realized that there was a kind of a reference point which was made to those Palestinians and other Arabs who are citizens of Israel. And they were talked about in the literature and also amongst the people I was interviewing as those who speak a lot of Hebrew. And the idea was that their Arabic had become somehow infiltrated with Hebrew, and there was a lot of reference to this, but there wasn't much evidence. And so then when I had the opportunity to do the postdoc, I decided to go and study the Palestinians and other Arabs who live inside Israel and who are legally citizens of the State of Israel, which makes them different from the Palestinians who live in the occupied Palestinian territories, and indeed the Palestinians who are refugees in other countries or who live in the diaspora. And so I set out to fill that gap, but now I was interested in kind of the elite socioeconomic group. So rather than looking at the most vulnerable people, the prisoners and the migrant workers and the refugees, I decided to study those people who had most agency in kind of controlling how they spoke and what language repertoires they could acquire. So this kind of then aligned with my interest in politics, which that was my first degree. My undergraduate degree was in politics and Hebrew, and also I had been working for a human rights organization, and we had been doing some research on the human rights of Palestinians and other Arabs inside Israel. So that was the new interest. But then I came out with these research questions that I had kind of elaborated, which was the situation inside Israel was different from the situations I had studied before, because Arabic was then, when I set out in 2014, was an official language, was the second official language of the State of Israel. But you could never hear it on any political platform. And so my first question was, why do we not hear more Arabic on political platforms in Israel? Why do they speak only Hebrew, these bilingual Palestinians and other Arabs? So that was the first question. And then the second question was, since the situation for this Palestinian and other Arab elite is one of bilingualism, they can access some very high registers of Arabic, formal Arabic. But from the literature, I thought that the ordinary citizens spoke a mixture of Hebrew and Arabic that was referenced in the literature. So I thought the politicians would have a dilemma. So these Palestinian politicians would have a dilemma. Their formation as politicians would make them want to speak a very formal type of Arabic. That's the political rhetoric. But when they wanted to attract votes, they might want to sound like people, ordinary people. So then would they speak this stigmatized mixture of Hebrew and Arabic? A bit like when Tony Blair, when he was trying to sound cool and kind of garner support of the center of the political spectrum, he started dropping the T's at the end of English words, like, he walked down the street. So I thought maybe these politicians in Israel would start speaking some kind of cool, maybe, slang. So that was the two research questions, and I went out to record these politicians and their constituencies on the campaign trail in 2015. So these were the Palestinian and other Arab politicians who seek to be elected to the Israeli parliament. That was my project. And I had a hypothesis was that there would be some kind of power dimension to their linguistic choices. So either there would be insider outsider power dynamics vis-a-vis the Israeli majority, and there would be some kind of class power dynamics vis-a-vis, they would be the elite and they were trying to attract the ordinary citizens to vote for them. So I thought there would be some class power dynamics internally.
And did you actually find what you were expecting?
Well, yeah, so not completely, no. So the great thing about doing fieldwork is that you go out and you have these theories and these hypotheses, and then you have to record how real people behave, and there's the unfailing weirdness of humans comes up, and then you get surprised by what you find. So I had to completely do away with, well, the first question had to change. So the idea that they didn't speak, the Arab politicians did not speak Arabic on political platforms, that had to be abandoned, because just when I set out, as if on purpose, they started speaking Arabic on official state platforms. But it would be a kind of, so then I changed the question. It was, so why is there always such an outcry each time a Palestinian or Arab politician stands on an Israeli official platform and says one sentence, or even a greeting in Arabic? And so I had, for instance, one of the politicians, Ayman Aude, who was the head of the joint list in that campaign, at Christmas time 2015, he stood in the parliament, in the Israeli parliament, and it just happened. It was before Christmas, and Christmas coincided with the Prophet's birthday, and so he stood up and he said in Arabic, "Happy holidays to everybody." Kul aam wal jami'a bkhair. And then if you look at the official transcript of what happened, basically he got shouted at for speaking Arabic. No, I mean, it wasn't. And this happened time and again. This was a pattern that kind of started off in about 2012, that each time somebody spoke up on an official platform, they'd say something in Arabic, and there'd be shouts of, "Here, speak only in Hebrew," and so on and so on. So I thought I had to change the question to accommodate what I was finding. And people from the whole political spectrum, including some Jewish Israelis who speak Arabic. So there's one Jewish parliamentarian who's originally from Iraq, and he said one sentence which was about internal party politics, and immediately got criticized for speaking Arabic. So that was what I found. And then there was the idea that there's this kind of hybrid language that the Palestinians and other Arabs inside Israel speak, these citizens. I had to abandon that because actually I wasn't finding any evidence that there was a new language evolving. All they are doing is borrowing a few words or code switching, sometimes using a sentence in Arabic, or in Hebrew when they're speaking in the other language. And in fact, that was similar to what I'd been finding in the West Bank. So actually, the Palestinians and other Arabs inside Israel behave linguistically similarly to the Palestinians in the West Bank that I'd been studying before, except maybe they were doing it more often and in more domains. So I had to change that question too. So anyway, basically my project changed because of reality intruding on the theory. And so, for instance, they do use it for ironic humor. So sometimes the Palestinians will use Hebrew, like a quote in Hebrew or something, ironically. And that's a type of humor that is common in the West Bank and inside Israel. Or they will use Hebrew terminology, some expert terminology, to show that they have knowledge of the Israeli system. That's a common way of using Hebrew. Another one is to create a kind of cool slang. So if you say "Bseder," for instance, that means you are signaling that you are cool. Bseder just means okay in Hebrew, but Palestinians and other Arabs might use it to signal kind of their consumerist or youth identity. And but they are capable of alternating this with formal registers just in Arabic to sound authoritative.
So, in fact, you're saying that they behave sociolinguistically in quite a normal sort of way, but you did, I think, find one thing that was quite specific to the situation.
Yeah, so the headline news is that Palestinians and other Arabs inside Israel are like any other linguistic minority. They are like other speakers. So Deborah Cameron has been working for 30 years to convince people to say that basically linguistically women are people. That's the radical statement of the day. And then so basically after 5 years of research, I've found that Palestinians are people. So if you take anything home, that's the headline, and obviously a big surprise. So obviously in this kind of situation where you have a majority-minority dynamic, the minority will adapt to that situation creatively, and usually multilingualism then accumulates in the minority group. So that's why the Palestinians and other Arabs in Israel are the ones who are bilingual. Not the Jewish majority would not necessarily need to learn Arabic because the dynamics of the relationship. And this is similar to, the many situations all around the world. And so that was one thing that we already know, that Arabic is somehow suppressed officially, at least since the 60s. In the 60s, it seemed to have become more hegemonic, the Hebrew dominance. And it also meant that Arabic was contained to the in-group. So it's one of the observations from my research is that I suggest that there's a tacit principle that you do not address anyone but an Arab or anybody who wants to be identified in that situation as an Arab in Arabic. So you cannot address a Jewish Israeli in Arabic. That seemed to be one of the rules that came across in all the situations that I studied. But it does happen. For instance, historically in Catalonia, Catalan and Castilian bilinguals would not address a Castilian speaker in Catalan. It's just not done. And this would be a legacy of the kind of historical situation of Palestinians and other Arabs inside Israel.
Can you maybe give us a couple of examples of where you observed this principle in action?
Yeah. So the most extreme situation. So there was several. I just tag along. So basically, my field work in 2015 was that the elections were declared early by Netanyahu because the government fell apart. And so because I wanted to follow these politicians, I quickly went out and started following them. So I basically recorded whatever I had access to. I went to 25 different locations and I followed these politicians in different types of interactions. There was, big town hall meetings, there was house visits, there was street leafleting. And on one occasion of the street leafleting, it was in a small town, Tira, which is in central Israel. It's it's an Arab town, so an Arabic speaking. It was market day, Saturday. So it was completely full of people. A very good situation to be handing out political leaflets. Basically, vote for us, the joint list, in Arabic, because they wanted Arab votes. But they got to these activists for the political party, including one of the main candidates, Aida Duma Suleiman. They suddenly were faced with a problem, which was that the marketplace was also full of Jewish Israelis because the shops are closed on the Sabbath in Jewish localities, so they were coming to Tira. And these three people distributing leaflets, wanting anybody who could vote, they needed everybody's votes. But they spent most of their energy trying to figure out who was a Jewish Israeli and who was an Arab, because they did not want to approach a Jewish Israeli in Arabic. And they kept doing these kind of negotiations amongst themselves, who would go first and try it. You go say hello. No, you go. Okay, I'll go say hello. And and when they accidentally addressed Jewish Israeli in Arabic, they felt so embarrassed and kept trying to repair for that mistake. But then when they did another mistake in profiling, and they did quite well. Most of the time they found a way of correctly attributing Arabic to Arabs and Hebrew to Jewish Israelis. But they made a mistake in the other direction, and that was fine. They could remedy that with a joke. Oh, you see, I didn't even think you were an Arab. And then they could continue in Arabic. So the mistaken profiling was only a problem if you addressed a Jewish Israeli in Arabic. Then they seemed to they had to do a lot of reevaluation of their strategy, and they kept saying, well, I don't know how to proceed. I can't see where the Arabs are. Now this was an Arab town. So this was the most striking. And then then it became kind of logical, all the other situations where a difficult choice, there was a difficulty in choosing what language to speak. This seemed to be the rule that they were measuring themselves against. Do not address a Jewish Israeli in Arabic. So there's a structural constraint. Even though they have all these multilingual skills, there was a structural constraint which was in this dynamic between the minority and the majority.
In your book, one of the things that I think is most interesting and kind of novel and original about it is that you do talk a bit about kind of new patterns or new groups that are emerging. So, what do you think that the future might hold?
Okay.
I mean, how you saw things kind of changing as well as not changing.
Yeah. So I'll look into my crystal ball and find what's happening. So some of the patterns. So one of the things that happened after the fieldwork was that in 2018, July 2018, Arabic was demoted from official language of the state. It's now language with special status. So it's not even legally anymore. It's not an official language. But in practice, obviously, it wasn't a bilingual state before this legal change. It wasn't like Belgium, let's say. Well, Belgium also has its problems. But so I grew up in Czechoslovakia, and as for some of my childhood, and I do remember that the television, the announcements would be there'd be Czech and there'd be Slovak, and that would somehow, obviously a Slovak might say something different about that situation, but definitely the case in Israel there was no such platform, not so often, though there were some news, some of the news was in Arabic, the official news, some broadcasts. But anyway, it wasn't a bilingual state, and so now this has changed, the legal context has changed, but I think then it will mean that the demonstrative Arabic, the rhetorical Arabic on official platforms now has even more political value. There's even more reason to use Arabic symbolically as a political rhetoric. So that might just intensify. Obviously, the big question would be around education and using Arabic for the national curriculum, which until now has been possible. But then there are other processes that are beyond the control of the state. So Israel has kind of gone through this neoliberalization of the economy since the 80s. And so since the 90s, there's been a really massive increase in the rate of tertiary education. And universities and other higher education institutes are the one place in Israel where social networks are not as segregated. So for a lot of Jewish Israelis or Palestinians and other Arabs, going to university would be the first place where you'd have a conversation with somebody from the other group. Or that's how it's been reported in the scholarship, and from my experience it's the same. And because, so for instance, and this is the pattern of increased tertiary education is worldwide, but here, because of the desegregation and then the increase in consumerism, has changed kind of patterns of what it means to have the good life. So these people who have been completely socialized in the Israeli system, this is now the third generation, and they are coming into their political prime now. They are demanding to be heard politically. And these graduates of the university, so now the rate is about 40% of school leavers go on to further education, both for Jewish Israelis and for Palestinian and other Arab citizens of Israel. And but the wage differential between Jewish Israeli graduates and Palestinian and other Arab graduates is quite big. So what these graduates can expect to work as would be working in call centers, working as teachers mostly, working in the service economy, so customer service in restaurants or in shops. And there they can use their multilingual skills. They will use their Hebrew as a marketable skill. So there's a different perspective. This is very different from the migrant workers who also knew Hebrew because they had to work on a construction site. They were manual laborers. They had to be able to understand the foreman speaking Hebrew, but they never regarded it. That was not the skill they were going to put on their CV. Not that they had a CV, but this was not the marketable skill. So the attitude towards what language means has changed with this generation. And on the elite level, then obviously these politicians that I studied, they see their multilingualism as a way of using rhetoric to maximum benefit. And similarly, then now we have a generation of great Palestinian cinematic production, which also plays on Hebrew and Arabic multilingual skills. And they also see it as a kind of marketable resource. So I think this late capitalism, it gives some opportunities, but they're kind of ambivalent opportunities. Now suddenly multilingualism can be revalued, but from a position where it's not been very valued to start off with. So you're entering a market, but from a position of disadvantage. So then I did do some research on some other field research in shopping centers, because I wanted to test I wanted to test this tacit principle that you cannot address a Jewish Israeli in Arabic. So I devised this a rapid anonymous survey in 3 shopping centres, one in West Jerusalem, one in central Israel, and one in the West Bank, actually. And in each place, I approached 12 people in Hebrew and 12 people in Arabic. I tried to choose them a bit randomly. And I chose shopping centres specifically because it was seen as, it was marketed not only as a place where you can, live the modern lifestyle and choose what consumer products you want to purchase, but also as a place of, a shared place for Jews and Arabs. That's on the official kind of marketing for shopping centres inside Israel. So you go there and it's this island of coexistence, according to the marketing strategy, in a situation of conflict. And there are studies, the marketing studies do indicate that young Palestinians and other Arabs do like to go to shopping centres disproportionately for leisure. They don't have the purchasing power, but they go there for leisure. And so I tried this. So I'd go up to people in the shopping centre and I'd say, hello, my name is Nancy Hawker. I'm doing a survey for my university, and I'd just like to ask you 3 questions about languages that you've heard here in the shopping centre. And for 12 people I asked this in Hebrew and 12 people I asked it in Arabic. I did the Arabic afterwards because I was afraid that I'd get kicked out of the shopping centre if I spoke Arabic too much. But I didn't get kicked out. Anyway, the pattern was that if I violated the principle, if I addressed somebody, a Jewish Israeli, in Arabic, then they were less likely to cooperate with the survey. The survey questions, I also noted obviously the results of the survey questions. It was a real survey, but it was also a test. And they were, what languages did you hear today? What did you come here to do today? What language do you speak at home? Did you use your home language in the shopping centre? And then those who did cooperate all requested a switch to Arabic. All requested a switch to Hebrew, even those who said that they knew Arabic. So the Hebrew dominance was clear-cut. But when I made the mistake, I knew I was making this mistake, that I was speaking Arabic to a Hebrew speaker. I could apologize and offer a switch to Hebrew, and it was all right in most of the cases. And my interpretation was that, well, it was anonymous. This was an anonymous place. It's the shopping center. Identities, these thick, problematic identities, seem to be lighter as long as you pass the security check and you can enter the shopping center. Then you can be part of that fleeting, anonymous, non-place and enjoy that anonymity for a while before you go back to your places, which are saturated with identity and conflict. So this is maybe the consumer's promise is that whoever can enter the shop will be happy, right? And as long as you can enter the shop, which is a securitized question. And that might be more the vision of things to come, not some kind of emancipatory like multilingualism that will somehow embrace the whole of society with respect for diversity and so on. Possibly this kind of consumerist pacification might be the vision of things to come.
Another thing that's kind of quite unusual about your book is that you added an epilogue to it, which is about your own life as a learner of languages and someone who went on to be a language researcher. So at the end of the book, there is this very personal, very autobiographical chapter, which, why did you choose to do that?
Yeah. So often, obviously, you get asked. That's the first thing you get asked when you do field work. Why are you doing this? And there are other scholars who have started to kind of present their own life experiences as a reason for their perspective on what they are studying. So there's a Jonathan Mendel who wrote The Creation of Israeli Arabic. He starts off with a preface explaining that he learned Arabic as a Jewish Israeli in the army and how this has affected his real challenge to that whole model, and that's why he's decided to learn Arabic properly, not just as a security or intelligence officer. And obviously he's now an anti-Zionist activist as well. But so there are other scholars. Bonnie McElhenney and Monica Heller wrote an autobiographical section in their book about language, capitalism, colonialism. And so I thought, especially in this conflict situation, maybe I should explain myself. Well, how come somebody like me wrote a book like this? And also my discipline, I had this postdoc at the Faculty of Oriental Studies. There's a lot of baggage, connections of our discipline with Orientalism and with securitism now. So I thought I needed to explain it. Also, I thought, okay, it's not my favorite object of inquiry, but it would be an opportunity for me to say thank you to all the people who taught me and who made me who I am, really got me where I am now, because I really, okay, I've got my name on this book, but I do feel that there's a kind of, things somehow come together, a lot of influences. It's not alone researchers, chipping away at the coal face of knowledge. So I felt that I needed to thank people, and because we are the products of what came before us, and I was in a network of people who influence each other and create what comes next. So I am going to do some thanking, because it is a book launch. I know some of you came maybe for intellectual stimulation, but there's a... sorry about that. But so I will say thank you to all the people who helped me along the way. It won't be too much like the Oprah show, or maybe like the good Oprah shows. And I'll take it chronologically, because it's a book launch. And I also really feel that this room, you all came, and I'm really, really grateful that you came for my book. And there's a kind of, I have a feeling there's a kind of genealogy of knowledge that the people who taught me and the people I have taught in the room. So first I'll thank my parents who are here. Mary and Nigel Hawker are sitting here, and they made life choices, and they taught me an attitude towards language learning that was the right attitude, which was basically, I'll sum it up, of course they're going to argue with me later, but of course you learn the language of the people around you. That was the attitude. And so monolingualism was never, I never thought that could be possible in my family. That was never how we operated. Also in this room, and this is very special for me, my friend Berenika Kucherova came to support me, and she's a friend from my secondary school in Prague. And it was her idea in 1995 that we should take Hebrew classes in the evening. We were teenagers, and we did that, and one thing led to another, and here I am. Can you believe it? So she had that good idea. Fast forward. Don't worry. I won't say. I won't mention my Girl Scouts leader. I won't do that. I could. Dr. Catherine Dean taught me politics as an undergraduate, and so the citizenship in the title, that's her teaching. It's citizenship as engagement with ideas of the public good, which is definitely something I've been trying to understand. And I also have Wasim Wagdi is here, and he taught me Arabic in 2004, the best teacher of Arabic in the world. I can't believe it. And I have friends from my SOAS undergraduate days. There's Timo Yutin is here, and Amira Mitchell is here. And they've been very supportive, as well as my friends Sylvia Finzi and Donna Bailey. Professor Clive Halls isn't here. He was my PhD supervisor, and he's continued to advise me, and he really led me quite to be very precise in my transcriptions of Arabic. So I also have former colleagues, now friends from Amnesty International. There's Rachel Campbell here, and Philip Luther, and Liz Hodgkin. And what I learned from them was that you triple check your facts before you write them down. And you write unambiguously. There can be no misinterpretations of what you write. Also, you do it at very late hours of the night. Hilal Alouche was helped me for my field work. He can't be here. He's a friend in Palestine and Israel. Dr. Brian Klug is here, and he helped me so much to navigate the moral minefield of Israel and Palestine political commentary, and also welcomed me at St. Benet's Hall in Oxford, which was a really nice base from where to work in Oxford. The Leverhulme Trust funded the postdoc. That made my life much more comfortable, and I had access to the great resources of Oxford University. And I have friends from Oxford here. I have Rosemary Hall, and the AKU volunteers who are going to serve us dinner and some food later on. So I owe them a lot. But very much I'd like to thank the Institute for the Study of Muslim Civilizations, my new home, and Professor Gianluca Parolin, who has been really of practical support and a good intellectual exchange in this new project on translation and politics. And most of all, I have to thank you, Professor Deborah Cameron, not only because of the postdoc would not have worked without your mentoring, and also you're key to creating the book, and also you came here for this event.
Of course.
Yeah, but also you've been explaining to the world what feminist discourse and sexist discourse is. So I don't know what we'd do without that. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Now,
Thank you for bearing with me.
I thoroughly recommend Nancy's book, and you will have a chance to buy it outside if you wish to do so. And if you're in an institution, you might want to get them to order it for their library. But this is a great book. It's about language and citizenship, which I think is a field that's kind of expanding in various directions. And I really appreciate, the fact that you did trail all these people around, and you did kind of make your theories, you did kind of jettison them when in favour of reality, when reality kind of contradicted things. So it makes a great read, including the last bit, which told me a lot that even I didn't know about Nancy's previous life. So, later we will kind of have a look at it and, have some food and drink and so forth. But in the meantime, this is an opportunity for other people in the room to ask Nancy questions. And I can see, okay, I'm going to go there first and then here. Oh, you want microphones? Yes. So somebody over there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting presentation and very interesting research too. My questions are about methodology. I'm just wondering if you had introduced to develop your narrative around big concepts like citizenship, multilingualism, and why you kept the sample so low if you decided to use survey. And related to this is, did you said that your sample was random?
Okay.
You used random sample. So how did you make sure? And did you ask people if they were born there in Israel, or because duration, use of language also depends on your duration at a place. So did you ask them? Did you distinguish between people who are actually born and brought up and who are new in that market? Did you make any distinction? Thank you.
Okay. Right, so there are several components to the research. So the first bit was the ethnographic field work. So that was when I had basically 6 weeks of time during the electoral campaigns where I followed these politicians who are Arabic speakers, but who also use Hebrew, and there were 17 of them. So some of them I recorded on several occasions. Some of them obviously were in conversation with each other, so it depended on the situation. So, and then because I started having questions about how we came to that situation that we're currently in, of this tacit principle and official suppression, Then I also looked at historical footage, so video footage of Palestinian and other Arab politicians speaking in Israel. And I also looked at the Knesset archives, so from the beginning, the establishment of the State of Israel, all instances where I could find that any politician had spoken Arabic, I tried to find it in the archives. So in total, the kind of oral data that I could collect was about 57 hours. And then what I was looking for specifically was instances of transition from Hebrew to Arabic, or from Arabic to Hebrew, and how that was justified if it was commented upon. So the discourse analysis was made much simpler than what Debbie has to do, because I was looking for the language contact justifications. So that's how I did. But then I also had to take into account that these people also have use other repertoires. So they use very formal Arabic or religious Arabic discourse, and so I did look for that as well. So the kind of the signaling of the transitions to those types of discourses as well. So I tried to collect all those transitions and then find patterns, and then in the book I give a kind of as many examples as I can of the patterns. So that was the main body of the research. Then the survey, that was just a kind of test, and it was only 72 respondents. I know that's not statistically usable. So in a sense, it was just to see whether my intuition that there was a tacit principle that you do not address a Jewish Israeli with Arabic, whether it worked in practice if you deliberately violate it. So it was a kind of
Garfinkel experiment.
It was a kind of it was a kind of experiment in the field, which there are some methods in ethnography which use that and have been studied. The randomization, yes. So I did not ask people any personal questions, because the point was that that in a way I stuck to the linguistic element. But you could tell that somebody's preferred language would have been American English or something like that. But even in those cases, the preference for Hebrew was so strong that even when I offered, would you prefer to do this survey in another language, they would say Hebrew. So even in instances, and there were quite a few, where they were American immigrants to Israel, let's say, or maybe, then it was possible they preferred Hebrew. And then the randomization, of course, wasn't perfect, because it was me doing the survey in like a street questionnaire. But I did try to counter any kind of intuitions that I had that this is. Well, obviously there are visual cues. They're sometimes quite strong, whether somebody is a Jewish Israeli or a Palestinian or an Arab. But then I tried to stick to. I only addressed people who were at ease, so they weren't busy. They weren't either working or shopping. And I did the first 12 in Hebrew, no matter who it was in front of me, and the other 12 in Arabic.
I'm going to move on so that more people can ask questions, and you were the first, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. It made me read up a little bit as such. I'll just preface my remark. I came across a book called Big Zerald by Grant Smith, you see. And this was planned about 100 years ago. The project Colonization of Palestine, and the Herschel and other invented. I'm just wondering whether this was the work of Ashkenazi Jews, unlike case of Sephardi or coming from Africa or coming from Middle East as such. And it seems to me this foisting of Hebrew was a political project. And I'm just wondering whether in your research, did you find any sort of Russian Jews, Sephardic Jews, or the other Jews finding, because I read something about these reluctant on the part of Russian Jews, you see, to relinquish and very annoyed at being foisted on the other people as such. Can you comment on this, please?
if you want, you can contact me and I can send you some names of authors who have done a lot of very good research on the situation within the Jewish community, where of course there is a lot of multilingualism, of course, because Jewish immigrants to Israel come from many different countries. I think the interesting point for me was that Arabic was a little bit different from Russian or English or the other languages, or Yiddish or German that they brought with them from countries, because it was already the local language. And yet the Jewish Arabs who brought with them Arabic already, they were sent to schools where they could not use that Arabic. So this idea that it was...
Prevented.
Pardon?
They were prevented.
No, it's just the schooling was so segregated by nationality that these children were sent to be re-educated and learnt Hebrew. Within one generation, these immigrants had to abandon their mother tongue, Arabic. Now there's a kind of, it's gone the full cycle. So the typically when you have language contraction like this, and this is obviously a very sudden contraction of Arabic amongst the Jewish community, there's then a kind of revival, and now we're seeing that some Jewish Arabs in Tel Aviv are learning Arabic again, and but they don't call it Arabic. So for the Iraqi Jews, they call it Babylonian. Actually, they don't want to. So there's still some problems around reclaiming Arabic for Jews, but there are some activists who are really working very hard on claiming Arabic as a Jewish language as well. So things are very complex within the Jewish community, but the idea of Hebrew as the language for that nation, that was instituted before the establishment of the State of Israel, and it became the language ideology of the State of Israel. So, and that what I'm studying really is that from that very abstract principle, the one nation, one language, how do people actually live it on the ground and in practice? Obviously, for this group that I was studying, it is multilingualism.
Yes.
Okay, there's somebody at them towards the back there.
Thank you. I was wondering if you had any remarks or observations about the linguistic landscape in the sites used in your fieldwork for visual presence of people in Arabic writing.
Again, if you want, you can write to me and I'll send you some really good work, and maybe you've done it yourself. I don't know, there may be people in the room who've... so linguistic landscapes is when basically researchers go into the field and they take photos, they delineate a certain area, and they'll take photos of every single sign, every single written sign they can find. And then they analyze which language are most signs in, and then they do a kind of...
And how big it is.
How big the sign, yeah. So obviously there have been studies like this about, and unsurprisingly, Hebrew is the dominant language even in Arab locales. So, and there's another issue of historically the erasure of the historical Arabic signs, and Yael Valach is here, he studied signage in Jerusalem, where with every historical era you have new signs of the new authorities trying to assert what kind of authority they are, and so they'll choose the language accordingly. I did not do that kind of research. My best skills are in the ethnography of trying to understand how people behave.
Yeah, there's somebody at the front here.
So I'm going to come back to the politics of some of the linguists. I'm really interested when you talked about Palestinians and then and other Arabs.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered if you could kind of elaborate on that and say whether you found some differences between, for example, Palestinians and the music community, and also whether there was some distinction within the Palestinian community itself, for example, between Palestinians from East Jerusalem versus maybe Palestinians from the Bedouin community versus maybe Palestinians from the Galilee. So I'd be really interested in what you found out in that area.
Thank you. So I did not do a kind of representative survey, right? Because what I was interested was how do these people engage with the political structure, how they express their ideas of the common good with this opportunity for them, which was either an opportunity to participate in the elections or an opportunity to say why they did not want to participate in the Israeli elections. But it was still an engagement with the idea of the common good. And in that sense, therefore, I won't be able to say whether the Bedouin in general or the Druze in general behave linguistically differently. It's been talked about a lot in the literature in those terms. The reason why I'm a bit skeptical is because there is not much field work done, not much ethnographic field work done in those communities, and a lot of generalizations are made on the basis of not much evidence. Definitely my sample included Druze politicians, included Druze citizens, included Bedouin, and obviously I studied the East Jerusalem people in a for the previous book. But about the Bedouin in particular, I spent a lot of time, a lot of the data I have is from the Nakab. And about them, there have been a lot of generalizations that they use a lot more Hebrew than the townspeople, the Palestinians from the settled areas. That's not true. Not in my sample, definitely. Even in the most deprived Bedouin areas, which is the places where there are house demolitions weekly, and the places which are very depressed townships where people have been resettled, and there's crime and on educational levels, and socioeconomic markers are at the bottom of the rankings. When they came to the town hall meeting to discuss ideas of the common good, they could mobilize high registers of Arabic because they wanted to be taken seriously. This was one of the most, I recorded quite a lot of hours of speech in those communities, and they did not speak differently from the people in Haifa, with a Bedouin with a Bedouin accent, but in terms of levels of Hebrew, it did not stand up. And there was one situation in Shkiba Salam, which is really, they only got connected to the sewage system a few years ago. This was a really deprived area, and even within the Bedouin community, some of them are looked down upon because it's a very they live in this township. They live according to their tribal affiliation, and one of the tribes, the Tarabin, they're looked down upon by other Bedouin because they are black-skinned. So this is really as low as you in terms of the socioeconomic scale, and these people would stand up, young people, and say to the politicians who were from the town, in eloquent Arabic, well, we find this a bit unusual that all these Palestinian politicians are coming to speak to us in one voice as if they've all unified and they have a joint program. We are a little bit surprised. They would challenge the politicians in pure Arabic, but that might be this was one of their strategies for getting political authority. So of course I didn't record them, though there was one place where I went to a meeting of the elders, of Bedouin elders, and I was the only woman there, and it was in this unrecognized village in the Nakab, with Zohair Bahloul, one of the Palestinian politicians for the Labour Party. And I thought, I'll use my ethnographic skills now. I'm going to ask to go to the toilet. I was the only woman. This is my little tip. If you're doing ethnographic, go to the toilet and see what's really happening. So I got away from the official meeting where all the old men were talking, and then I went and I met with this young couple who let me into they have to live in these kind of shacks because they keep getting demolished, but inside it was a very modern flat, a bit like our block in northwest London, and lovely bathroom. I had to change into plastic slippers. And we had a little conversation about where they work and what I'm doing and this and that, where they go shopping, and they also spoke in Arabic. It was not a mixture with Hebrew. But in the literature, a lot of generalizations are made about and the assumption is because the Druze serve in the army and the Bedouin can volunteer to serve in the Israeli army, that they will therefore use more Hebrew. So there are kind of assumptions about the determining link between politics and language, which actually is not so deterministic.
Okay, any more questions? Yes, you've been waiting for your embarrassment of microphones there.
I'm interested So you seem to offer counter-narrative to the kind of anxiety that we do hear about the corrosive influence of Hebrew and Arabic of Palestinians in Israel. And I can think of Anton Shamas's essay, Mixers and Pigeon, where he kind of says, Palestinians in Haifa can't even say a proper sentence. It's just the connecting words in Arabic, but all the rest is Hebrew. So you seem to say this is an overstatement, and that's actually we have a pretty normal, even a conflictual, contested situation. I'm interested to whether it's because you're at the political discourse, and specifically you're mainly for jointries. So whether it's different if a merits candidate or labeled or is it different if Dr. Name is in the room? Sometimes it does come in this situation, the Jewish member of parliament or the joint list. Does it make the dynamic difference? Because of course the joint list runs on Palestinian tickets.
Thank you. So I did follow the merits candidate Aisawi Frej on his. He was very generous and let me. I went with him on a house visit in Baqa, Al Gharbia, and I also followed Zohair Bahloul. I tried to have access to the events by the Arabic speakers in the more right-wing parties. So there are Arab politicians who are candidates for the Likud. There are candidates even for a Jewish home, Habitus Yehudi, which is, and there's for Yisrael Beitenu, which is Lieberman's party. There are Arabic speakers there. My networks didn't allow me access, and I had to do it very quickly, so I don't have any evidence from the right-wing politicians. For the centrists, I will tell you, there was no difference. There was no difference, and I'll give you this story. So Hanin Zabi was the candidate for the most nationalist Palestinian party in the Knesset, and I was told by a friend, do you know that at the headquarters of the National Democratic Party, Tajamu' Balad, this nationalist party, they have a swear box in their headquarters. For every Hebrew word that you speak, you have to put a shekel in the box. And I was like, really? I have to find that box. So I went, and literally, I was there for the talk, of course, but I was kind of looking, where's that box? And they offered me tea, and I was like, yes, could I have the tea? Yes, is that where the swear box is? Because then that candidate, Hanin Zabi, and she's a very outspoken nationalist candidate, and they have this is a space of language purism in the extreme. This is where it is most policed, this is where pure Arabic should come, if anywhere. And within 5 minutes she had used so many Hebrew terms, expert terms, it was, and some of them were, maybe she was repeating them so much it sounded a bit maybe sarcastic. So she'd use the official self description of the state of Israel as the Jewish and democratic state. And so she kept saying democratic, the Jewish and democratic state. So that she'd say in Hebrew, for instance. I don't know if how many shekels she owed to that swear box, because it might have overflowed. And Zohair Bahloul, who was the Labour candidate, he would have never done that. He could alternate between high registers of Hebrew and high registers of Arabic very skillfully, but he would not mix. And so, they are just like any other people with their skills and with their preferences. My interpretation of Hanin Zabi at that moment was that she also was showing she is an expert in the Israeli political system. She knows all the terms. She needed to show her supporters in the headquarters, I am a veteran of this system, I know the lingo. The same as the manual workers I had been studying before, they knew the names of the tools because they were experts in their particular domain. But I did not see any difference according to... of course, then there was Dov Khanin. So Dov Khanin, that was interesting because he was always introduced as a Jewish Israeli who knew Arabic. And there were certain situations which were quite intimate, just him and his Palestinian colleagues. They would only speak Hebrew. There was never any translation offered. He would sometimes, once in a while, say it was okay to speak Arabic, but they'd switch back to Hebrew. And he never once enabled the maintenance of Arabic by speaking a little bit of Arabic himself, maybe. And it was interesting. Obviously, he was the more senior politician. That might be one of the reasons. But definitely, the principle was in action there, and it made a difference, of course, that he was there, which was a good thing. But Hebrew always came back. And we can talk more about it.
Yes, well, I think there are many more things that people probably want to say, but they can talk to you later. I think we need to stop this collective discussion so that you can have a chance to look at the book and to avail yourself of the refreshments that have kindly been provided. And so thank you to all of you. Thank you to the Aga Khan Centre and to Jean-Luc here. And thank you above all to Nancy Hawker. Do buy her book.